about 1,500 Bitcoin lost. The value in US dollars is over $100 million. That the exploit was potentially a generated exploit from an AI. Bitcoin is the canary. So these same tools are going to be used by nation-state hackers against banks, government, insurance, payment processors, every damn thing.
Welcome to Honest Money. I'm your host, Anja, and today's episode is brought to you by Hardblock. Joining me back on the show today for a very special and important episode is Tim. Welcome back to the show, Tim.
Hey, thanks, Anja. It's great to be back. Not such great circumstances, but we can dig into that.
Yeah, so let's dive straight in. Obviously, the Coldcard hack happened. Specifically, what happened and what have we learned from that?
Oof. So broadly, a hack was found for the Coldcard wallets from Coldcard that they were able to exploit what is essentially what's called weak entropy, and that enabled them to steal and sweep coins that were stored in Coldcard hardware wallets and had been for many years. And at this point today, we're about 1,500 Bitcoin lost, about 7,500 coins have moved, UTXO, so some obviously smaller than a Bitcoin and some a lot, and some multiple Bitcoins. The value in US dollars is over $100 million, and we've gone from one attacker exploiting the vulnerability to, hey, I'll have some of that as well. And there's around about 15 or 16 groups concurrently attacking the vulnerability and sweeping people's coins. So really, really tragic for people who've lost coins.
Yeah, so far in kind of the Australian community, I only know maybe of one or two people that have been affected. Is there any chance for these people to get their coins back?
There is a slim hope. So Australia, along with Canada and the US, are the top three affected geographies, at least according to Chainalysis. So not good in Australia. I'm aware of more people than that have lost coins, some smaller amounts and some much more significant amounts. Can they get it back is going to depend upon ultimately law enforcement at two levels. So the first will be, can they identify the perpetrator or perpetrators? And having done so, are they able to get control of the coins? So there were a few apparent missteps. So there is the potential that the original perpetrator used a blockchain analysis platform to identify potential candidate addresses before executing the attack. So it was a targeted attack. And that was with a logged on account. So there will be some credentials associated with that person with that account. The second one, which is, I guess, a bit more of a rookie error, is having swept about 500 addresses, they then swept them all into a single consolidated UTXO. So it's very clear for those first, I think, two sweeps, which have gone into two individual addresses, that that was all executed by the same person. So Alex Thorne over at Galaxy Research has done an incredible job keeping on top of this. If you are in the unfortunate position of having lost coins, please reach out to Alex. So he is Intangible Coins on Twitter, now called X, and he will try and put you in touch with law enforcement. He will tag the addresses of the coins that you lost so that they are included correctly as being stolen, and that will at least give a small chance of recovery. So the two parts of the recovery are Firstly, law enforcement's got to catch the dude or the dudette or the people, and then they've got to get control of the coins, and then they've got to return the coins. So it's very difficult to know how likely that is. The last part of returning the coins, unfortunately, law enforcement does not have a good record on that. If we think about the Bitfinex hack from 2014, 15, the coins were recovered, some 80,000 Bitcoins. They are still in the US government's control. They've not been returned to Bitfinex yet. So, and as we saw with Mt. Gox and the collapse there, the bankruptcy proceedings and return of coins to holders, obviously a very different circumstance, but that took over a decade. So I would have to say it is a slim hope. I'm really, really sorry for everybody who's lost coins. It is really hit the community hard, because it's not like Sam Bankman-Fried and friends who were egregiously fraudulent and literally stole people's money. This was plebs doing what they thought was the right thing, probably air gapping their Coldcard, and thought their coins were as safe as they could be. That's why it's
Yeah,
hit a lot of us pretty hard. Even if we haven't personally lost coins, we've been very busy helping people protect their coins, move their coins into new wallets, teach them about the entropy they should have set up, and so on.
yeah. Unfortunately, like Coldcard has very much been marketed as one of the more secure wallets to have. And so a lot of people who were recommending it are now feeling obviously very guilty about that, even though, yeah, so let's maybe talk about the technical detail, because from the research that I've done, it seems like it could have been something that was very easily missed in the code.
So just before we dive into that, I just want to make a comment about the people who have been recommending cold cuts. Coldcard was a good recommendation last week, not a good recommendation this week. The people I know who have recommended Coldcard, some of the Australian community, some international podcasters like Matt Odell and Marty Bent and Stefan Lavera, they all recommended it because they used it. This wasn't something that they were paid to do, and they did it because they were paid. I know each of them secured their own coins and their family's wealth using Coldcard. They walked their talk, and they are absolutely gutted to find out that they have been they feel misled, deceived, and hoodwinked. And I feel, yeah, I feel for those guys. It is a very difficult thing to make specific recommendations for Bitcoin security, and when you do, you kind of, yeah, you take a little bit of responsibility for those coins that you help secure. Yeah, very tough. So what happened? So the timeline looks something like this. So stepping back a little bit further, I've got some notes on this. 2014. So in 2014, Slush and Stick in Trezor created the first hardware wallet. Before 2014, there were no hardware wallets. And they created the very first one. In 2017, CoinKite forked the open source software, the FOSS software that Trezor had built for their firmware, and they started building a new hardware wallet. And in 2018, they launched Coldcard Mark 1 and followed that on with iterations Mark 2, Mark 3, Mark 4, Mark 5, and most recently the Coldcard Q. In 2020, a new company called Foundation Devices started up, and they did exactly what CoinKite did. They forked the CoinKite firmware and started building on that. And that is the beauty of FOSS, is you get to stand on the shoulders of the giants who've come before you. So the founder of CoinKite was very upset about that, which quite frankly, was pretty hypocritical given that he had started his own company the same way, or started building the product the same way. Irrespective, he made the decision to remove the GPL license, which is one of the major FOSS licenses, free and open source software, and downscale it to a, I think, Creative Commons license. So it was source viewable. Everybody could look at the source. One of the implications of that, though, is by removing his firmware as GPL, he could no longer use anything below that was GPL because you inherit the license. It keeps things open. So he had to remove GPL components and replace them with new components. Some of those components were written in-house, and that is where the core coding error to do with the entropy came in.
Quick one for the Aussies listening. Hardblock is offering a $10 sign-up discount right now. And if you're with another exchange, ask yourself this: are they Australia's longest running Bitcoin-only exchange? Because if not, maybe it's time to switch. Head to hardblock.com.au/join/honest money and start stacking sats today.
There were two parts to that, two significant failings. So the first was that if the random number generator couldn't be invoked, then it would fall back to a software random number generator. So random number generators are the mechanism by which a hardware wallet or a software wallet comes up with a random number. And so we want that to be very, very random, technically that's called a high amount of entropy. And as it turns out, the fallback mechanism did not have a high amount of entropy. It had 40 bits or less, I think. That meant that the range of possible keys, instead of being billions, atoms in billions of galaxies across the universe, came down to a much smaller amount. So that was the first error. That was an implementation error. Probably, in my view, the more egregious and unforgivable error is that there was a fallback there in the first place. So from a security perspective, you want to stop. You always want to err on the side of caution. It's not, hey, excuse me, can we get through that special door? Oh, you don't have the code. Oh, that's all right. We'll just go around the side door. It's like, no. If you can't use the hardware that you're supposed to be using, that is to do with the creation of the secret, then you stop. And maybe that means the device has failed. So the reason for those design decisions are only going to be known internally at Coldcard. Same with the code change, but Coldcard is accountable for all of those. And I'm sure I've seen some of the conjecture about whose fault it is, theories about it. There will be an unlimited amount of time that law enforcement and forensic investigators and lawyers will dig into that in detail, I'm sure. So, in a nutshell, the secret creation component of the wallet was not fit for purpose. The secrets that were created, the seed words, were not sufficiently random. Someone discovered that vulnerability, built an exploit, and ran the exploit, and is thousands of Bitcoin richer. And plebs are thousands of Bitcoin poorer. And it's devastating.
It really is devastating. So when the news first came out, I believe they only mentioned that MK3 was the hardware or the model that was compromised. All the others were still deemed safe, but now it seems like that it's MK4, MK5, and the QoS. Is that correct?
That's correct. So MK3, the Mark III with the compromised firmware, is the most vulnerable. If you are listening to this and you have coins on a Coldcard Mark III, you need to go and read their security advisory. If the wallet was created with the compromised firmware, I really hope that you added the dice roll entropy and or created a strong passphrase. Irrespective, get it out, create a new secure wallet, and move your coins ASAP.
Yeah, and on that note, if someone is feeling very spooked or not confident following these events, should they be rushing this process?
If they're on a Mark III, getting your coins out of the Mark III ASAP, yeah, they really need to hustle. They really need to hustle. Unfortunately, there was a story from someone in Australia who was warned about this, I think, on the Friday or the Saturday, and they said, "Oh, I'm busy. I'll do it on Sunday." When they came to look at it Sunday, coins were gone, and they were swept on, I think, Sunday morning. So those sorts of things are really heartbreaking. So yeah, move them. I've got friends that have moved fairly significant amounts of funds onto phone wallets. They've downloaded a wallet, set the wallet up. You just using the phone, create me a seed, write the seed down for backup, and move the whole whack onto the wallet. And just gone, okay, it's not going to get swept. Now I've got a little bit of breathing space. For everybody else who's on Mark 4, 5, or Q, or in fact any of the CoinKite wallets, the Coldcard wallets, at this point, my perspective is the design flaw with allowing a fallback on the random number generator is so egregiously bad that what other design decisions for which I do not have the competence to go and look at hardware, firmware code and evaluate, but others may and probably will. What other poor decisions have been made? In my view, if it's a Coldcard, you need to move your coins off. Period.
Yeah, we've heard from a few exchanges in Australia that some people have been moving their coins to an exchange as like a temporary interim measure. Is that reasonable advice for like a quick fix if you don't have the means to acquire another wallet, or I don't know?
Yeah, it is. The first thing is not to lose the coins. And if you have an exchange that you've got an existing account on, then moving those coins onto the exchange to give you the breathing space of a few days or a week whilst you dodged a bullet there. Okay, I'm going to have a calm, quiet space. I'm going to set up a new wallet. I'm going to test the wallet with a small amount. I'm going to make sure I've got the seed phrase backed up. And now I'll transfer. So that is a possibility. Several other groups have come out offering assistance and help. Guardblock at Hardblock have done so. If you need to move your coins in there quickly, Peter and Andy's group, the Bitcoin Advisor, have also offered that. No charge, no obligation. Just get your coins in safe custody first. Have some breathing space, and then step back and set up your new wallets and take the coins back. As has Rob Hamilton's Anchorwatch in the US. Anchorwatch is insured by Lloyd's of London, but not available to Australians, unfortunately. So US only. So yes, number one thing, save your coins. Number two, get yourself some breathing space. Figure out what you didn't do on the Coldcard, and then select the new method and move your coins back into self-custody.
Yeah. So let's go back to the basics of self-custody. Obviously, everyone has different advice. What the different ways to self-custody your coins. So what have we learned from this particular scenario that we can do better moving forward?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point to start on. You is there are three things that are important with Bitcoin. So I don't want to get stuck into the details of are you using seed phrase or Shamir secret sharing? Are you using a passphrase? Are you using multi-sig? Are you using collaborative multi-sig? Are you using 3 or 5? Are you using Frost? Are you using legacy multi-sig? None of those things, they all come back to this basic idea of a secret. So the secret could be single sig, could be multi-sig. You can have passphrases on it. There's all sorts of mechanisms. But at the end of the day, it's a secret. The secret is your Bitcoin. If you control the secret, you control your Bitcoin. So three things that are important. The first thing is creating the secret. That was the thing that the Coldcard, especially the Mark III, was not fit for purpose. So if you used the Coldcard to create the secret, you outsourced that. You introduced trust that did not need to be introduced. Instead of taking the time to use Entropy, which is my personal favorite, or dice or cards, and there's various mechanisms and approaches for doing that. Instead of building the entropy in a trustless way in the real world, you said, I'm too busy for that. Trust me, bro. I'm going to take the trust me, bro option. Coldcard, you just create, you create the randomness. You create the seed words for me, and I'll just take them. It'll be good, right? Yeah. So the first thing that essentially all wallets or all Bitcoin needs is the creation of the secret. The second thing is you need to protect the secret. So on a hardware device, that will be keeping the private key in a secure enclave, making sure that there's no way into the secure enclave. And we can look back in history and we can see, well, the very first Trezors, if you've got physical access to that Trezor and about $100 worth of electronics, you can extract the private key from the secure element. Ledger showed that's possible with some of their ledgers. The Ledger have a security, a black hat team or white hat team internally, so they try and crack their own devices, and they showed that was possible. They needed $250,000 worth of machinery and special lithography and X-ray from memory. But the general takeaway there is hardware devices need to be physically secured. If you have control over a hardware device, you can potentially compromise it. Obviously, the hardware device manufacturers work very hard to make that exceptionally difficult, and they always strive to make it impossible. So that's the second thing, protecting the secret. And if you're not using a hardware wallet, then you're protecting the secret in another way. Perhaps you're encrypting it on a USB. Perhaps you're encrypting it with very strong encryption, and you're creating multiple copies, and maybe you're keeping them in digital places. Maybe you're keeping them on devices. And then the third thing, so we need to create the secret, we need to protect the secret, and the last thing is we need to use the secret. Because although we love to save Bitcoin and protect our savings from from overreach and inflation and all of that, there comes a point where we want to spend Bitcoin. And that, I think, is where there's a little bit more subtlety. So this is the way I think about it. So the segregation of the different types of custody that you want, or the different types of control and protection that you want, is different depending on the size, how often you use the stack. So, for example, if I've got the self-custody version of Wallet of Satoshi, I'm fine with that on my phone. I might have a couple of $100 in it. When I go to a bush bash or a meetup and someone's selling soap or beer or coffee or lunch, I can easily just spend that. So that's something that I would use on a daily or weekly basis. Easy. So would I prefer to be able to create the secret? Yes. Can I? Lightning kind of depends. If you're going to run your own Lightning node, yes, you can, but yes, that's out of the reach of most people. So you're going to use a wallet where that's going to be created for you, and that's probably, it's not ideal, but it's okay for small amounts. It's about balancing the risk, and we're going to use that frequently. The other end of the scale is your cold storage. So I've started buying Bitcoin. I have no plans to spend it. I know it's part of a long-term plan. I'm not going to touch it for 5 to 10 years. Okay, 100%. I am going to create those seeds offline. I am not going to introduce any Trust Me Bro component into that. Now, maybe I might start off with just a single signature because I don't have very much Bitcoin. And then as I accumulate more and more Bitcoin, and as the price of Bitcoin goes up, then maybe I'll start thinking, hey, single sig's a bit of a point of failure, and you move to multiple signatures. So in that case, you absolutely categorically want offline seed creation. No ifs, no buts, no wiggle room. The second part of that, the protection of the key, you want minimum tech, i.e. no tech. So how are we going to record those words? Maybe you put them on steel plates. Maybe you write them on multiple pieces of paper that are kept in very secure places, possibly bank vaults. Everyone has different thoughts on this. It's not my role to make decisions for anybody except me. So that's the securing part. And the little story, I think you've probably heard me tell this at a bush bash, is when I first started in IT, the really cool personal storage was 8-inch floppy disks. And then I think when I got to uni, it was 5 1/4 discs. And then it was 3.5-inch discs. And then it was CD drives. And then it was DVD drives. And then it was USB drives. And now we've got USB-Cs. And if you go and buy a new laptop, some of them don't even have the original USB-A ports on them anymore. They certainly do not have CD drives, and they most definitely don't have floppy drives. So the key point I'm making there is if your storage is for the long term, you want the absolute minimum of tech. Tech is not your friend for long-term storage. In my view, hardware has no place in cold storage.
Need a way to sign, verify and secure your Bitcoin? Australia's one-stop shop for Bitcoiners has you covered. From signing devices, nodes and backup solutions to bitaxes, decor and apparel. Visit shopbitcoin.com.au.
Super simple, but that's just my perspective. But as a general rule, you want the minimum of tech in your cold storage. So creating the key, protecting the key. The last part, of course, is using the key. So again, cold storage, it's the most important part of your Bitcoin. That's where you want to keep that air gap between the key and the signing. So you'll often hear people talk about signing devices as opposed to wallets. So not all signing devices can hold a key. The seed signer is a good example of that. So that's what's called ephemeral keys. You've got to physically load the key into the seed signer in order to sign a transaction. There's a trade-off to that. The trade-off is if you're using a seed signer, that means your seed has to be physically available to you somewhere. And so if you talk a lot about using a seed signer on a daily basis, that means your seed is available somewhere. So those are the two opposite ends of the spectrum. And then there's one in the middle. And in a Bitcoin business, or for people who are using a lot of Bitcoin using Bitcoin on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, that's what I think of as an operational wallet. So you might be spending hundreds or thousands of dollars a month, for example. And so you don't want the complexity of maybe getting multiple keys that are kept in different places all together on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. Way too much friction. So that's where I think a hardware signing device can be really good. I've used a number of them. My favorite at the moment is one they don't make anymore, which is the Foundation Passport. Very simple. Looks like a Nokia 3310. It's kind of a flashback for the old dude, right? Um, and it has the basics of, I can read the partially signed Bitcoin transaction from Sparrow. I can sign it on the device. The key is on the device, and that makes life easy. It's a nice balance in between. So I think those two things together are a good framework for thinking about how you set your keys up. So if you're early in your Bitcoin journey, you're still learning, you've figured out that it's an important part of your financial future, probably your cold stack is, almost certainly your cold stack is the most important thing. So you definitely want analog key creation, secret creation. You probably want the minimum of tech in the protection, and the signing device. You can kind of figure that out later, because if you're not expecting to touch it for 10 years, it's all good. The middle one, that's where you're potentially going to bring a hardware signing device into it, and then usually the daily spending, you're probably on your mobile phone. So 3 things: creation of the key, creation of the secret, protection of the secret, use of the secret, daily use, spending, weekly, monthly use, operational. Maybe there's a hardware wallet in there. And third, the cold storage. You want the minimum of tech, and you absolutely categorically want offline secret creation.
Yeah. For people who are listening into this and thinking, gosh, this all sounds so complicated. And obviously there's some people as well that have been saying that this event makes self-custody dead. Is that true?
Most of us can read and write, and we can write down 12 words. And if you can write down 12 words, you can do self-custody. Now, where Bitcoin is unforgiving is that there is no CEO to call up. I mean, I've tried calling him a few times, he never answers. But you do need to know what you're doing. So and that comes back to the issue of entropy, which is why I'm such a big proponent of doing creation of the secret should be done in the real world. So you use dice, you use cards, or you use something like the seed pills Entropy, where you're pouring 1,024 little pills into the kitchen mixing bowl, and you pull 11 of them out, and you write those down on a piece of card, and then you use a mechanism. I use a seed signer. I think you can use Passport, Foundation's Passport. You can use Ian Coleman's. He has a web page that you can download and use offline. Put your 11 seed words in, and it tells you the 12th. So the 12th word or the 24th word is a checksum. So it's calculated from the other 11 or the other 23. So you do need some tech to do that. But you want that tech to be offline, not connected to the internet, because you've got to put in those 11 words or those 23 words. So you don't want to do all of the careful, thoughtful, considered work on the kitchen bench, fishing out those 11 little tiles, only to then type it into an online device where someone's logging it or watching it, or so on, and end up compromising.
And if someone wants to randomly select their own 24 or 12 words?
I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I can share what I've learned. And one thing I know is that human evolution is really good at recognizing patterns. We can pick the cheetah and the lion out of the foliage, and those of us who can get away and run up the tree before we get caught. Maybe not a great example with leopards, because they can climb trees. But we're really good at recognizing patterns, and it's something we do at a very basic level. Humans are really bad at random. And I think it might have been in the Bush Bash chat that someone was posting about, if you ask someone to give you a random number between 1 and 100, there are, I think, 3 numbers that are presented more than 50% of the time. Everyone thinks, oh, that's an unusual number. I'll go with that one. You know, they tend to be primes. So 57, 17, 43, that kind of thing. So we're really bad at being random. We're really good at recognizing patterns. And we do that pattern recognition at a really subconscious level. So we're blessed to have Piers Cockram in our broader Australian Bitcoin community. He has built a site called Wallet Playground. I think I'm just going to
walletplayground.com.
Walletplayground.com. On walletplayground.com, there are entropy tools, and you can see how different things work. You can see there was a guy in the US called Jimbo. He invented a very secure and random mechanism for using a deck of cards to create seed phrases. And it's not just, oh, I'll pick them out randomly. There is a quite a defined process. Same with using dice. There is a defined process. Those are all available on Piers' site. And then there's my personal favorite, which is the Entropia. I bought that locally, hands up on the Sunshine Coast, printed them all out on his 3D printer. I think it was $150. So in some ways, quite expensive. I really only used it a couple of times up until about a week ago. And it's had a hammering over the last, it's been borrowed by lots of friends and it's had lots of use, and I've been very, very glad. The key thing I like about it is you don't have to explain entropy. You don't have to explain randomness. You can just pour all the pills in the jar, as I did in a kitchen bowl, as I did with my brother. And he's like, oh my God, how many of these are there? 1,024. He's like, oh, they're different on each side. And I said, yeah, 2,048 seat worth. And he goes, oh, wow. So he pulls one out. We write that down. I said, now chuck it back in, give it a swirl. He goes, oh, okay, I get how it's random. I said, yes. You and I could sit here until the end of the universe and we'd never pull out the same 12 in a row. Same 12 twice. So you need a defined process to achieve the required level of entropy that guarantees the security of your secret. And that's what Coldcard did not have. It was not fit for purpose.
So you mentioned FOSS before, which stands for free and open software. Is that it?
Free and open source software.
Software,
Yep.
that's it. What's the significance of that?
So FOSS, the free is free as in freedom, not free as in beer. Now, it is a very important part of Bitcoin because FOSS software is software that everyone can see, anyone can contribute to, if they're smart enough and their ideas are good enough, and their skills are good enough, and you can build on top of it. So everyone who's built a product on or around or on top of Bitcoin has been able to leverage that, and that's why the importance of FOSS in the Bitcoin community is really significant. You cannot step away from that, and I think the CoinKite decision to revoke the GPL license will be used as a case study of why that reversing that decision ultimately led to their downfall and the loss of so many customers' life savings and funds. So free and open source software, it's just so important. FOSS, or free open source software networks. So there's quite a few of them, and they all lead to total domination. So I'll give you a few examples. When you send an email to me, I have no idea what type of computer you use, whether you wrote it on your phone what software you use to write it, and you have no idea what I read it on, what type of computer I use, what software, and you don't need to know, because the underlying connection between those two things is the protocol, SMTP, Simple Mail Transport Protocol. Beautiful. Same with HTML. HTML is an open protocol that anyone can use to render information, create websites. Tor is another example where it's a protocol that can be used for the secure transport. PGP for the security of signing and messages, and Bitcoin. Bitcoin is open source software for the transmission of value. Yeah, so everybody likes to use open protocols, but nobody wants to pay for them. So that's where the rub can be. However, open source software means we get to stand upon the shoulders of the giants who've come before us. Ideally, we contribute into those, and other people come along and build on top of our stuff or reuse things that we've built. And in that way, more and more people get access to more and more functionality and software. So in the corporate world, I use Windows for 30 years, I guess. And now I'm very strongly an open source proponent. I use Linux. It's a far superior product. It doesn't scan my data. It doesn't charge me annual licensing fees.
Not your keys, not your coins. If you're holding Bitcoin, your self-custody setup needs to be done right. MindRacks delivers paranoia-grade security so that you can sleep at night knowing that your money is protected. Take control and secure your money the honest way. Head to mindracks.com/honest money. So you mentioned before that there are multiple hackers now. There was one to begin with, and now we've got more than one. How do we know, and what exactly does that mean?
So I think it was Rob Hamilton at Anchorwatch that might have initially identified the possibility that the exploit had been built by one of the recently released open weight models. So most of the US models you cannot use for cyber defense or cyber security or cyber offense. And so as a consequence, the open weight models, which are predominantly coming out of China, are the frontier models as far as cybersecurity goes. So on that conjecture, a small number of Bitcoiners have banded together as what's called the red team, and they are using those open weight models to verify and validate that the vulnerability existed and could be exploited. Rob did that within moments, and then didn't stop. So he did the broader thing, which was to step back from helping people directly. He has a whole company to do that. And he started then saying, well, if there's a vulnerability of that severity in the CoinKite ecosystem, and this new open weight model, 2.5 trillion parameter model, has the capability to identify the vulnerability and build the exploit. Let's point it at some of the other things in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And so he started doing that. I think by Saturday he'd spent $3,000 worth of tokens. It was 5,000 by Sunday. By Monday it was 10,000. And now they're spending 10,000 a day, and there's a group of them working around the clock, generally referred to as the red team. The red team in a cybersecurity context are the guys who have no holds barred in trying to hack something. So you might engage a cybersecurity company to do a penetration test, and they'll have a black hat team, they'll have a white hat team, and they'll have a red team. And the red team doesn't have any of the constraints that the other two teams have, and they can try every dirty trick they can to attack your particular service platform or software or hardware. So whilst the phrasing red team for the Bitcoin red team, that's where it comes from, they're committed to responsible disclosure, and they have been working literally around the clock for the 5 or 6 days since this vulnerability came to light. There have been hundreds of projects affected, and I think over 4,000 disclosures have been made. So it's quite literally an avalanche of disclosures. The wonderful thing is, because we've got access to open weight models, we can use that for defense. So there's no question that it's going to be used for offense, and that's clearly where, in my view, that's clearly where the other attackers have come from. They've seen the noise about this on Twitter. They've gone, oh, new open weight model. Let's point Kimmy at the Coldcard code base. Can we discover the vulnerability? Oh, yeah. Can you build me an exploit? Oh, yeah, no problem. Here you go. And then unscrupulous people will then try and attack potentially vulnerable wallets, sweeping coins where they were successful. So Alex Thorne over at Galaxy Research has been keeping a note of these, and if you, as I mentioned before, if you've been affected, please reach out to Intangible Coins on Twitter. Let him know that you have lost coins. He'll be interested in the details. That is a small thing you can do that might increase your odds of assisting law enforcement to get your coins back. It is a slim chance, but that's the starting point. So ultimately, it's the rise of AI tooling that has accelerated the attacks. The beauty is that same tooling can be used on the defense as well. So this is going to be a cat and mouse for quite a while, and Bitcoin is the canary. So these same tools are going to be used by nation state hackers, but they won't be used against Bitcoin. They'll be used against banks, governments, insurance, payment processors, every damn thing. It'll be a rough old ride. It'll be a bit hectic, I think was the phrase I used last week.
Yeah. Is there anyone who is, that we know of at least, who's actually trying to hack those coins, get there before the criminals do, with the intent to return it?
Well, possibly, Anja. I honestly don't know. The difficulty in doing that as a white hat hacker is, how do you validate the owner of the coins? So you find a vulnerable address, you calculate the seed, you look at the wallet, you see there are 28 UTXOs in that wallet, you sweep the whole wallet. Okay, now you've got someone's life savings. How do you identify who to return those coins to? It's not a trivial issue, and you are in a very tricky legal position, irrespective of the moral position. So, yeah, I've heard the argument that CoinKite could have known of this, but couldn't tell customers because it would be exploited. Now that's possibly a defensible argument in 2025, maybe even the tail end of 24, when good AI tooling was starting to arrive, but not in 2021 when this arrived, or 2022, or 2023, or even 2024. But at this point, you just need to move your coins.
Yep. And final question. So anyone who is using a different hardware device that has a completely different manufacturer and brand, who may have also used the device to generate the seed, and they're not generating it themselves, has this kind of taught us that we really should be upgrading our self-custody setup so that we're not waiting for this kind of thing to happen to another?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So yeah, if you're feeling if you're out there feeling comfortable because you don't own a Coldcard, you need to step back and go, did I generate my secret? Did I use the trust me bro approach and generate it using the device, or did I go through a little bit more effort and be completely sure that there is no possible compromise to the entropy, to the randomness of the secret? If you can't remember, assume the worst and assume you took the easy route, and that's okay. Now you've got time to step back, learn a little bit more, do it correctly, and then you will sleep better.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time. Obviously, this is one of the more important episodes I've done on the show. Do you have any final things you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Anja. It's been a really challenging period for a lot of people. Obviously, people who've lost coins, my heart goes out to you. It's just absolutely tragic. For the many people that's joined in the decentralized global support desk for supporting Bitcoiners and receiving panicked phone calls and messages from friends and family and others we've helped along the way. Thank you for stepping up and helping them secure their coins. And if you need help, there are plenty of resources. The resource I mentioned earlier on Peers Resource Wallet Playground, walletplayground.com has lots of good advisory articles there. Piers himself is also in the industry. That's what he does. He helps people set up wallets. So if you want to learn more about self-custody, great place to start. Equally, explore Guardblock from Hardblock or reach out to the Bitcoin advisor. The critical thing is make sure your coins are safe, and then you've got the clear thinking space to make a calm, considered, rational decision without.
Great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Anja.
Still here? You're one of the good ones. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. If you enjoy how we cut through the noise, consider supporting us directly via the Lightning QR code. Got a question or a thought to share? Comments are wide open. We'd love to hear from you. For bonus content and updates, follow us on socials at Honest Money Show. Until next week, take care of yourself and your money and stay decentralized.